I think the constant desire for acceptance and approval, the need for people to always say, you're amazing, you look great, you this, you that, that's a prison. And so I think understanding that, you can be as much of a high achiever as you want, but if you actually want to drive your own path, you need to kind of really step into your personal authority and back yourself. And that's not something that I think a lot of young women feel allowed to do, and I will say even women my age, we've never been allowed to do that, and that's where I think kind of you start to really come into yourself.
From the Sarah Smiles Network, I'm Sarah Smiles, and this is the Consider the Source podcast, a show about women who've built ideas, movements, and careers by questioning the status quo and challenging norms in the hopes of inspiring other women. On today's episode, I have Jill Reilly, who talks about her book, The 10 Permissions, which is an amazing book that allows us to accept the idea of going outside of the typical quote-unquote success path that we are all predestined to if you're a high achiever, and that there is so much more out there if you just allow yourself the permission to believe it to be true. In this episode, we talk about Jill's big move to South Africa during 1994 when she left college and left the United States to go move to a country across the globe. We also talk about Jill's exploration into the idea of what the 10 permissions really are and what they really fundamentally mean to young women and young people in Gen Z specifically, as well as Gen Alpha, because we're going to be the ones that are going to rewrite this narrative of just becoming a rat in the rat race. She also talks about what it's been like to create a sense of authority in her life and how you can create a sense of authority in your life as well. I absolutely love this episode, and please make sure to pre-order her book, The 10 Permissions, on Amazon. It comes out on September 16th, but make sure you pre-order it on Amazon. And without further ado, here is Jill. How has your summer been? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm actually, because we are on the other end of the equator,
It's your winter.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
as you can see, and what most people don't get is that this part of Africa has a very cold winter, actually. So, I mean, relatively speaking, it's not sort of like Denver cold, but it can get cold here. But it's been fine. And you, have you had the crazy heat that everybody's had in other places?
We've been experiencing probably like some of the warmest temperature I've lived in so far.
Really?
So yeah, it's been exciting. A lot of air conditioning, which has been a good invention for us here. But yeah, so glad that you reached out, Jill, because 10 Permissions it's amazing. And I would love for you to share more about that and how you got the idea for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the subtitle is Redefining the Rules of Adulting for the 21st Century, which is very relevant to at least the path that you've been on in so many ways, both your own path and what you're trying to create, I think, with the podcast. Because I think the reality is that we're living in this like super fluid world where, a lot of the old ways of operating, like go to school, get a good job, da da da, that super linear, like follow the path sort of mindset is either not feasible for people anymore, and that it's not so straightforward. One thing is not leading to another in the way that it might have for your parents or your grandparents. But also people are sort of opening up to the fact that maybe they want something different. They want more flexibility. They want more autonomy. So the book is about really allowing yourself to think about how you lead your adult life differently, to allow yourself not just to kind of say, is it okay? Is it okay if I don't go to college? Is it okay if I create a podcast? Is it okay if I, decide that I want to have a portfolio of roles rather than go and look for one job, but to like really super intentionally drive your own path, direct yourself on it, because I think that's kind of what we have to do right now.
Yeah.
The world is changing so fast, and that's kind of my whole work for my whole life has been helping people navigate change. So I did something crazy when I was your age, which was to come to South Africa to be a part of this country's social change process. And I just basically had the most incredible education, if you will, in how people sort of adapt and evolve and change throughout their lives. So now I'm taking all of that and sort of putting it into the 10 permissions and saying we need new sort of stories for now, and
Yeah.
we give ourselves permission to create them.
Yeah, 100%. And what was the motivation so where, I'm assuming you're from the United States based on your
Mm.
accent,
Mm.
but where were you living and why did you decide I'm gonna pack it up and move to South Africa? Because that is a long ways away from the US.
It totally is. So I was from St. Louis, grew up in Missouri like a Midwestern girl, and very
Mm-hmm.
much I high achieving, don't cause trouble,
Mm-hmm.
went to Northwestern University and was like, I'm going to get a great job. I'm going to go to law school. So it was very conventional, what I
Mm-hmm.
would call kind of good girl programming, if you will.
Right.
And while I was at college, I just started to kind of, open up my mind a little bit to what I wanted to do with my life. It so happened at the same time that South Africa was going through this big, it was the end of apartheid, the end of, this very racist and, unjust system of governance. And they were having these elections. It was a long time ago. I'm going to say 1994, which was probably before you were born. And I decided I wanted to come to South Africa and be a part of that. And it
Yeah.
was really like weird because I didn't have like a really ironclad like argument for it. Like my parents were
Mm-hmm.
just, what? You can imagine,
Yeah.
horrified.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And trust me, it was a different world then. So it was even
Oh
like
yeah.
it was more foreign than it is now. It was just like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing? And
Yeah.
one of the things I talk about in the book is that, sometimes when we're acting on some of our deepest desires, we can't always kind of put words to them in a way that makes sense to other people. It's like, I don't know, I
Mm-hmm.
just want to go and be a part of something that I think is meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was really awkward with them, but I had a very strong sort of inner motivation and I backed myself, which
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty radical for a 21-year-old woman, but I did it. And, the way I talk about it in the book, it's like it's kind of like a muscle that once you start exercising it, you feel more confident and comfortable doing it. So the first time that you make a
Mm-hmm.
choice that other people don't get, you're kind of like, ah. And then once
Mm-hmm.
you start doing that, you're like, I'm okay. Like it's gonna be okay. I'm all right here. I'm backing myself. So yeah, it was just a desire to kind of be a part of something that mattered.
Yeah. And like what you were saying earlier about it being a different time, like there was not the internet, there was not anything for you to have really any sort of good form of contact between the
Oh, no.
US and South Africa. Like you was the idea that you were fully willing to embrace this ideology that you'll move to South Africa and just keep in contact with the family through snail mail.
No,
Wow.
doesn't it sound absolutely crazy as you say it? Yes, that was the idea. We
Yeah.
had, I think, I don't remember what we agreed that we'd have at the beginning, it was like a once a week phone call. I mean, I've got two teenage sons who are 17 and 14. And when I talked to them even about like being in college, and it was like I talked to my parents once every Sunday, maybe, they were like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, what? But yes, yes. Expectations were different then. We were not in contact with
Mm-hmm.
each other constantly. And you know what?
Right.
I think in some ways it kind of, this is going to sound really weird, but it kind of helped because I think some of what happens now is that because we're in constant contact, every little thing that comes up, we communicate and we share with somebody else who's like
Mm-hmm.
on the other end of the line going, oh my God, like what's happening? Da 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 da. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
when it's just you and you're
Mm-hmm.
out there and you just sort of have to deal with it, you sort of come into yourself and you realize like,
Yeah.
okay, I just have to go and do this. And it keeps you a little bit more like centered and grounded as you head
Mm-hmm.
out. So as much as it sounds wild that I was sort of out there by myself without constant contact, at the time it was just like I sort of, if you will, kind of got into it. It was like, okay, this is
Yeah.
where I am. This is what I'm doing. I just
Yeah.
need to do it.
Yeah, and I totally understand that ideology in the sense of my brother went to the Marine Corps, and
Mm,
when we went to like the family sessions, they were telling us don't write in your letters that you miss them. Don't write in your letters how home isn't the same because they're
right.
going through this already hard thing. And so that just put me in the mindset of the information that you get from other people and the sentiment that other people try and like share with you, it isn't always necessarily what's best for you in that moment. And sometimes it is good to just step away and remove yourself and live in South Africa and only talk to people once in a blue moon.
Yeah, I mean, I did not grow up in this era of, constant communication around
Mhm.
every little thing that's bubbling up for you. But I do think, some of what I talk about in the book is this like inside out finding your way. Like you're not constantly
Mhm.
looking around for somebody to tell you what to do or getting somebody
Yeah.
else's take on something. And I do think it's really hard when you've got so many voices that are just always coming at you with their own take on something that, frankly, in that situation, it was like, well, nobody else was there. Nobody else
Right.
could do anything about anything. So, had
Mhm.
I been like messaging them, like, oh my God, I can't find this place, or they couldn't do anything about it. So,
Right.
I think in some ways, a lot of the anxiety that we feel right now is that we're constantly communicating around what we're experiencing to people who either can't affect it or can't impact it, or as you say, might have some sort of take on it that actually isn't that
Mhm.
helpful to us. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Being someone that was working a corporate job and then just up and decided to quit and go and work on a ranch, there was a lot of people that were like, "What are you doing? Like, why would you do this? Is your mental health okay? Like, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I only live once and I would like to live a life that I enjoy. And I
yeah.
don't need to explain that to you. And I feel like in this society, I feel like the 10 permissions are so important because I don't need to describe or explain what my rationale behind something is. And I feel like with social media, especially a platform like LinkedIn, which is so career
Mhm.
driven, there's an explanation for everything of why you're leaving a job, of why you're going to the next job, of why you're taking a hiatus. And
Mhm.
I feel like, why does everyone need to know that information? It doesn't need to be so out there and so in need of describing. So for me, I'm really interested in obviously, this was a huge step for you moving from a typical life of this is what you're supposed to do. And like what you said, this is what good girls do. It's like we just go
Mhm.
to school, we go to college, we get a degree, we get a job, we get married, and we settle in the areas closest to our families. And that, to me, it's like boring. Sorry. It's maybe someone else's best life, but it's not mine. And I feel like it's been such an urge for us to feel like if you don't do that, then something's wrong. If you don't do that, something, your life is corrupt, or you're not able to actually connect with your family, or you're not able to actually find a steady job because people aren't going to understand you. So, with these 10 permissions, how did you come up with them? Because 10 is kind of a lot.
Yeah, it's a good round number. There were kind of 10 very specific ways to kind of flip the script of supposed to, as you were
Mm-hmm.
describing, all those things you're supposed to do, some of which,
Mm-hmm.
are told to you, most of which are not, right? So that's the thing
Right.
is that I think a lot of this kind of conditioning is very implicit. We just carry it around with us. We're not necessarily aware of it. And so when it comes time to make the choices about our own lives, we're often kind of like not even aware of how we're making our decisions, what we're basing them
Right.
on. Are we even sort of tapping into what we want, or have we completely outsourced that to some story that was handed to us when we were born that we're, not consciously writing ourselves? So, in many ways, I wanted to kind of touch on 10 different elements of that, what I call sort of should story or supposed to
Mm-hmm.
story, and encourage people to think about it differently. Like each one of them is a little provocation to say, what if the ways that you've always been told to operate are no longer feasible or desirable? What would you, what
Mm-hmm.
choices would you make if you really felt you were allowed? So, to take the first one is like be willful.
Mm-hmm.
So, the willful child is the problematic one. The willful, especially for females, the willful woman is a bitch. If you tapped into, well, what is it that I want? and truly felt allowed to kind of listen to that, to respond to it, to act on it, to say it to other people like you did, I want to go and work on a ranch. For
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, you know as well as I do, that is like completely out of bounds. Like you don't do that. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I experienced in my life was a lot of people who get to midlife and they've never, ever thought about what they want. And they've certainly
Mm.
never given themselves permission to act on it. So, that idea that you kind of found your way through life by figuring out what else everybody else wanted you to do and then become that, I'm saying let's flip that on its head.
Yeah.
Not only because it leads to us having, as you say, you only live once, like having lives that we actually want, but also because in this crazy world where there's so many different options and so many different potential paths forward, you actually have to know what you want more than, maybe like my mom did or something. It's like, now you're going to feel overwhelmed if you don't have a strong
Right.
sense of what you want and what you want to kind of be a part of or create. So yeah, they were kind of 10 specific ways to really provoke people to think differently about what's possible, what's desirable in a
Mm-hmm.
world that we all agree is kind of really chaotic and everything's very fluid, like how to create a more fluid and adaptive life.
Yeah. And obviously, like what you're describing of people just going and experiencing the norm or experiencing the should do's, that to me sounds a lot like corporate America. You go to college, you go to get this 9 to 5 job, you're in a literal rat race
Mm,
of you're just scurrying around this maze. And there was a point in time when I was working at my corporate job and I just froze and stopped and looked around. I was like, oh my God, what is
mm,
actually happening here? And it was at that point where I was like, I need to go to this ranch. Like, it's not a want, it's a need. And
yeah,
I need to get out of here. I need to know that there are other people that are like me that are also looking to experience more in life, more than just a paycheck, more than just this is what I'm supposed to do. This is the easy route. And I feel like this is a conversation my brother and I have very frequently is people will take the path of least resistance. And the
yeah,
path of least resistance is often the one that most other people take.
right.
And for me, I was like, that is not for me. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's really what's echoed in the 10 permissions is
Mm,
the path of least resistance is the path of least resistance for a reason.
yeah.
And it's because you're not giving yourself these permissions. Would you agree with
Absolutely.
that?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the default path, for everybody. It was, again, go to a good school, get a good job, and that good meant corporate. I mean, good was not judged by satisfaction. Good was judged by salary and by status and by the potential that it offered to you to kind of work your way up a hierarchy. All those things. The way I talk about it in the book is that, historically, the exchange has been satisfaction for security. So
Mm-hmm.
you do whatever it takes to keep getting that paycheck. And that's how we sort of define security. Well, at least I know I'm getting my paycheck. And I think where we're at right now is also really interesting because, we are watching in real time those sort of so-called secure jobs and secure lives unraveling.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is so interesting now too, is that a lot of what people the should story doesn't hold up anymore because
Mm-hmm.
the entry level jobs are being taken away, the middle management of a lot of big corporates they're, heading over to AI. So I think it's a really interesting moment where a lot of this programming is being
Mm-hmm.
challenged by our lived reality of, okay, but wait a second, I can't just sort of, as I like to say, put on a suit and sleepwalk.
Yeah.
Even if nobody's wearing a suit anymore. I'm being forced to kind of wake up and go, okay, what do I
Right.
want? So I think it's a really interesting time, and I'm weirdly optimistic that in some ways it's gonna get more and more people to think a little bit more creatively and critically about the kinds of work they want to do, the kinds of places, they want to be a part of, and not just sort of default to what's always been.
Yeah, I have this concept or this idea or theory that there's going to be a renaissance in the next, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years, because I feel like exactly what you're describing, people are putting their suits on and sleepwalking, and they're not really awake and realizing what they're doing. And I think that there's going to be a revolution where people start taking up their passions and pursuing their passions as careers and really putting an emphasis on those human creation things that we're able to do. Like AI can't write a book about 10 permissions because it doesn't know what it is like to abandon a norm of reality to go and live a life that you want to live because it doesn't
Right.
know what that is.
Absolutely. It's quite amazing because you haven't read the book and yet you
Mm-hmm.
are echoing exactly what's in the book, which is, I
Mm-hmm.
talk about the fact that we're in the middle of this great unraveling of sort of all of these default sort of stories about how we're supposed to live. A lot of the hierarchies are flattening. We're losing faith in institutions. Our social norms are sort of more fluid and liberal than they used to be. So a lot of the kind of containers that used to hold us and tell us who to be and what to do and how to behave are loosening and becoming sort of, much more fluid and less fixed. And that's
Mm-hmm.
leaving us feeling scared because we now have to choose. We now have to decide, and we now have to really reframe our understanding of what good looks like, of how we gain security in a world where it's pretty clear that corporates are not looking after us anymore. But what I talk about is how that unraveling becomes your renaissance. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like totally with you. I think, there is an opportunity here for a kind of renaissance in terms of all the human capabilities, as you've just said. We were encouraged basically to be like machines, right? That
Right.
was just keep going, keep doing. Don't feel too much, don't demand too much, don't ask for too much, blah, blah, blah. And now to flip that on its head and say, wait, now actually what we need to do to thrive is to actually be more human.
Yeah.
So it's really unsettling, but I think within that is like so much opportunity for some really interesting ways forward for all of us.
Yeah, and it's interesting for you to have written this book in South Africa. Is this something that you're also experiencing there, or is it something that you look back on the US and your family's still in the US and you're like, I can't believe you're still doing that, or I can't believe that that's still what's happening there?
No, I think it's a global thing. I mean, I think,
Mm-hmm.
I have feet in a lot of different places. I've got family still in the States. I've got, if I can say, I think my perspective comes from a variety of different places. And I think,
Yeah.
of course, it's different depending upon where you are, but I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the themes are the same. I think a lot of us are, feeling very kind of disoriented because a lot of the old ways of operating just aren't working anymore. And a lot of the old sort of equations that we had for if this happened, then this happened, and this is what we
Mm-hmm.
expect to happen aren't happening anymore. And so, there's this real, and I think post COVID, we kind of thought, oh, eventually things will go back. We'll return to some sort of, it's not happening. It won't
No.
happen. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't actually think the nostalgia is for like the way it used to be because, people weren't that happy. People weren't actually
Right.
thriving the way it used to be, but we had a trusted formula for financial security, and that was
Mm-hmm.
what people want and crave. And I think the idea that now we have to accept the fact that we're our best security. Your ability to adapt and evolve and change and create is your best chance at security. And for some people, that's completely terrifying. For other people, I imagine for somebody like you, it's like, yeah, I get it. Okay, cool. Now I need to
Mm-hmm.
like roll my sleeves up and figure this out. So, I think it's going to be very challenging for people because we haven't been prepared for this. But on the other hand, we're all going to be going through it. And so, how do we, I think conversations like this are a great way to kind of put out there that we're all trying to find our way.
Right.
And it's taking us into unfamiliar places that, aren't necessarily what we expected, but here we are.
Right. And earlier you were talking about what the metric of success was in the United States in terms of
Mm,
if you have a good job. And it wasn't based
mm,
on the barometer of if you were happy or not. It was just based on
mm.
is it a good company? Do they pay you well? So,
Right.
what do you think would be a fair assessment of what success looks like then?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have been for some time and continue to be in the middle of people interrogating that and
Mm-hmm.
giving themselves permission to decide for themselves. I think what we are certainly seeing in, dare I say, younger generations, but people coming into the workforce now is a greater desire for autonomy and flexibility. an unwillingness to make that exchange that I talked about earlier, which was satisfaction for security. You're a living example of that. And unwillingness to accept that by pursuing something you want, you are making yourself inherently insecure, because that was the flip side of it.
Right.
Oh no, you can't go and do that because then you'll never, it's like you're going to end up living in somebody's basement. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
not really. I've just done a podcast where I interviewed 5 people who've had very unconventional life paths. They're absolutely thriving. They're fine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I think, none of us wants to be insecure, and none of us
Mm-hmm.
wants to, be patching a life together. And I think I want to kind of break through that false dichotomy that you either work for somebody else or you spend your life in kind of chronic insecurity. I think there are a
Yeah.
lot of people who are starting to regard their own control over their time, their own control over what it is that they're creating, what it is that they're in the
Mm-hmm.
process of contributing to the world as key indicators and metrics of success. Um,
Right.
these are very different than I sell my soul so that I can have a McMansion. It's like,
Right.
for some people, that will remain super important to them. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
this is not a judgment of that. This is an assessment of, is that the only story? And if I don't
Mm.
have that, does that make me somehow inadequate or
Mm.
unsuccessful? It's a kind of encouragement to say, can you really intentionally decide for yourself what matters, back it, and then accept the fact that in a really fluid world, where acquiring assets and scaling hierarchies is no longer feasible or desirable, do we finally let go and sunset some of these ideas of what good looks like and accept the fact that
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a lot of different versions of that? That maybe having a small apartment in the middle of a city is that allows you flexibility to move around is, your idea of success because you get to kind of do what you want. So it's sort of definitions and metrics that match this world that we're living in right now, rather than ones that are sort of relics of another world.
Mm. Yep. And I feel like with all of these permissions that you've written about in your book, they must be personified in some realm and that has drawn you to write about them through inspiration. So you have clearly given yourself permission to become an author. You've clearly given yourself permission to move across the world. Like, what are
Hmm.
these permissions the embodiment of? Have you seen them outside of yourself, and is that what inspired you? Or is it mostly just your story and your journey that has allowed you to embody them and write about?
That's a great question. I mean, yes, obviously they're very personal.
Mm-hmm.
They start very much from my own story, but they're also born of, a career of working with people who felt very stuck in whatever story they were in. And
Mm-hmm.
whether that was women in Zimbabwe or corporate executives, the idea of people who did not have a lived, your word, embodied capability to write their own
Mm-hmm.
story, has been the hallmark of my whole career. And I was having another conversation where I said, I feel like I've spent my lifetime with people who felt stuck in a story
Yeah.
they didn't write, and yet they didn't feel they had the authority and the capability to write their own. So
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, they're born of my own work around what does it take to get people to kind of switch that on inside themselves.
Mm.
And the realization that you don't think your way into that, you act your way into it. So, for instance, the be willful is like, again, I said, how many people have I worked with who have no idea what they want? Well, how can you begin to kind of have a more satisfying and integrated life if you don't know what you want? The idea of going astray, which is the second one, which is sort of moving beyond this sort of head down linear mindset towards something that embraces, change and trying different things. So all of them are about my own lived experience of what it takes to learn, adapt, and evolve and throughout the course of your life. And the realization that a lot of that comes from, action, not
Mm.
rumination. Like making different choices, putting yourself in different situations. So, yeah, they are both personal, they're professional, and they're really more born of, as I said, sort of spending so much time with people who felt they couldn't make the
Right.
choices they wanted than, a lifetime spent with people who could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like that is what is so important to understand is that you have to take action It
Mm.
can't just be something that you talk about, because the more that you talk about it, the more you're going to convince yourself otherwise. Other people are going to convince you otherwise. And it's going to become this loose idea that, oh, well, maybe one day when I'm happier, or one day when I'm more settled, or one day when I have more money. And that one day becomes further and further away because you keep
Yeah.
moving the mark. And
Yeah.
that's something that I have seen in my generation specifically, of once I get to this level position or make this much money specifically, like once I make over $100,000, then I will figure out what I really want to do with my life,
Mm.
because or then I'll be really happy. That to me is just a constant moving target of, okay, well, once you get $100,000, like, you're an ambitious person. You're going to want to get what the next step is, and you're going to be focused on that next goal. And it's for
Mm.
what? Are you really that happy? You're this miserable in this job, but you're happy because you're making $100,000. And that's been a conversation that I've had with a few of my friends. We're engineers, and
Mm.
I have had this conversation with them of, it doesn't have to be your job as your end all be all. You can do
Right.
things outside of work. You can create a life outside of engineering, and you don't have to be totally consumed by it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much just met with, after I get to this, then I'll feel better. Or once I get this extra degree, then I'll feel better. And
Mm.
it's like, feel better at what? Feel more qualified? Feel like you're going to move up? Like, what are you doing these things for?
Yeah.
And that has been a huge barrier for me, of trying to figure out, okay, what really is my rationale for wanting to do this? And sometimes my rationale is just that I want to do it. Like, there is no game plan in the background. There is no, well, this is a career opportunity where I can continue to move upward if I decide to move here and do this and take this class and get this degree. It's just the fact that I want to do it. And I feel like that alone is so difficult for people to understand.
I think, that in and of itself is the most radical thing. And it's where the permissions start. Are you allowed to act on what you want, or does there need to be a very clear upside? And so, one of the things that I think is happening right now is sort of what you're describing, is that if then, if I get to this
Hmm.
stage, then I'm going to do that. And that was the entire mental model for decision making as an adult, traditionally, historically. And I think some of what's happening right now is causing us to have to act, to want to act without that clear, outcome and that predicted sort of upside, if you will, because you might not have the luxury of
Right.
waiting until that point, or only acting when you know that there's going to be this clear thing that will be a benefit. And I think, if there's one huge mindset shift, it's what you just described. It's sort of acting based on desire, and acting without a clear, predictable outcome. But you act because by
Mhm.
doing so, you immediately shift your reference points, right? You immediately move into a new state. And I sort of
Right.
describe that as an active learning state, and within that
Mm.
state, you've already shifted your reality. So you're
Yeah.
getting new inputs, you're meeting different people, you're beginning to see yourself through a new lens, through the people that you are engaging with. And that, is kind of like a state change. You've immediately changed something. Whereas the mere thought of something doesn't change anything at all. It's just a projection of a potential outcome. And I think, action as a learning sort of tool, action as a way to immediately create feedback, to immediately
Hmm.
create sort of something new for you to take in and respond to, is so, so critical. But, what you're describing is also this kind of arrival fallacy of, once I get there, I'll feel better. Once I get there, I'll be in a better state. And I think some of this, I talk in the book about behaving more like an explorer and less like an executive. Like, you need to sort of be in this state of exploration, not because it feels good, because novelty's great and want to be fun, but because you're kind of remaining open and receptive to what your options might be moving down the road, knowing that there's a very good chance that within the near future, you might, get disrupted. Something's going to shift.
Right.
You're going to have to respond. So, for me, as I think about this, it's like going from a mental model of your life to sort of, I'm going to go here, 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 and then maybe I'll change a little bit. And then da 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 da, where there were like a couple of big changes in your life, but mostly what you tried to do was maintain the status quo to I'm actually routinely embedding change, learning, growth, adaptation into my life to make me more responsive and resourceful and adaptive because I can almost be assured that over the course of the next few years, something's going to buffet me, something's going to require me to,
Mm-hmm.
so I sort of describe it as like personal change management. You're driving your own change process. You are embedding that capability into
Mm-hmm.
your own mindset as opposed to, yeah, I'm just going to kind of keep doing what I'm doing until I get a bigger role or I make more money.
Right.
That feels kind of old fashioned to me in a world where you have no control over when you're about to get, dumped out of whatever role you're in. So
Right.
you better get ready to move.
Yeah. And that brings me to my next question of there's 10 commandments, or not 10 commandments, there's 10 permissions. There's
You
also 10 commandments, but
you can compare the two.
which really is the 10 commandments of your life. But anyways, you have these 10 permissions. And with these 10 permissions, how much do you feel like, okay, you kind of have to embody all of them. Otherwise, you're going to be a little half in, half out and not really reap the benefit of that. And what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. So for me, I keep teetering between I'm going to do the things that I want to do because it's going to make me fulfilled, it's going to give me purpose. And then my family, very typical. Like I said, I'm an engineer, my dad's an engineer, my mom's a doctor. Like they are very much so working class people. And the rest of my family is like that as well. My brother just called my dad the other day and was like, I'm worried about Sarah. She doesn't have a career. And my dad's like, what are you talking about? She's fine. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I want to do what my family is doing because it worked for them. But I also feel like I don't belong there and I'm teetering between the two. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to get at is do you really have to embrace all 10 of these permissions in order to feel more fulfilled? Or is it like, you can probably do 8 of these and 2 of them, it's fine.
You wouldn't want anybody to feel like this is some sort of, you have to embody this entire package or else it won't work. I think, each one of them will like probably have resonance in different ways at different times of your life. And, I really wanted the book to be something that you could pick it up. And if you only opened it up to, one of them, you could read that and that'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Mm,
And then, it's not this linear, like you must get it from 1 to 10 and you must love it from 1 to 10. It's like,
right.
yes, I think they form a whole in terms of this idea of sort of setting out into the world. And one is about your sort of, the first couple are about your sort of mindset and set of expectations of what it's going to look like. The others are sort of how it might feel and then how you're going to practically navigate it and that kind of thing. But I think depending upon where you are and possibly even depending upon the day, like after,
Mm-hmm.
if you had a conversation with your dad, where he was like, are you okay? You might come back to like go astray and be like,
Mm,
okay, I feel like I've gone astray. I feel like I'm the one who went off piste with her life. And now I've got a whole family who's sitting. So, by the way, I am also that person. My family doesn't have passports. They don't. I'm the odd one out. As much as, yeah, there are times when it hurts or it feels weird or I
mm-hmm.
wish it was different or I wish I looked more like them. It's also something where, I've learned what a kind of superpower it is as well, because it
Right.
means that I have this capability to sit a little bit on the edges of something and
Mm,
still feel okay about it and still feel safe. And trust me, that ability translates. It translates into rooms where maybe you don't feel like you're in, but you can kind of sit on the edge and know that it's okay. You're safe and
mm-hmm.
secure. All right. So I think, there's an ebb and flow of how we move through these things. And depending upon where we are, we might reach for something different to just help us kind of stay the course.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're always negotiating our desires with those of the people around us. And most of us are trying to find some sort of middle ground. But I think that, I always would urge people to come back to themselves. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're feeling okay, and if you're able to support yourself, and if you're able, like, you are the one whose opinion matters most. Your own sense
Right.
of self is the thing that you go to sleep with at night. And conversely, if everybody else is thrilled for you and you're friggin' miserable, then that is not a recipe for satisfaction either. So
Mm-hmm.
this navigating sort of and calibrating your own needs and your own sort of sense of the way forward with what other people are saying around you. Yeah, it's a constant thing. And I think again, these permissions are a little bit intended to say, it's okay, step into it, like do it. Don't half-ass it. Don't be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I think I kind of want to do this, but I'm not sure. And no, no, no. Like, if you're going to do this, then let's do it, right? Let's kind of put something
Yeah.
behind it and do it with some intent and a little bit of, strategy so it doesn't feel like you're just casting around sort of doing stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that answered your question.
Yes, it does. And as you have given yourself permission, obviously, this was probably something that you had to give yourself permission for is writing this book of I'm qualified to say this, I'm qualified to write about this. Like that had to be a huge permission that you gave yourself. Like what was that like?
How did you know that? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hello, imposter syndrome. Hello, who am I?
Yeah.
I mean, those. So, what I learned and what I have learned is that I have learned to like be like, hello, when those voices come into my head because
Mm-hmm.
they are signs that I'm moving into new space in my life and probably space
Mm.
that I belong in and that I need to be in. They are not a reason for me to turn back. They're a reason for me to kind of take a deep breath, get, strong in the pit of my stomach and go, okay, well, I'm, moving ahead into this. This book took me like 5 years. Started it 2020 during COVID because I was kind of going nuts like everybody else. We were either making sourdough or writing books. It took a long time for me to give
Mm-hmm.
myself permission to write the book that I wanted to write, not the one that I thought I was supposed to write.
Right.
And as you say, that was very central to that was me leaning into my own authority. That I'd
Mm.
spent 30 years with people trying to find their way, and I had something to say about it. And I was going to back myself that there was value there. In the middle of it all, both of my parents passed. It was a really profound sort of sense of, yeah, what's it all about? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was this kind of coming together of a lot of different things that made me say, this is the book I want to write, and this is what I'm going to create. So it's a daily exercise in just sort of recognizing those voices that say, you're not supposed to do this, this isn't you. And
Right.
just, as I said, beginning to flip them around from warning signs to little arrows pointing me forward to something that deep down in my belly I knew I had to do.
Yeah. And if it gives you any sort of validation, like you said, I haven't read the book yet, but after this conversation, I'm like, wow, I'm really inspired to read this. I really feel like there's a lot of things I can learn. And for me, it's obviously I'm in my 20s. And what gave you the idea to really target this at young adults as opposed to maybe someone who, like recent divorcees or something like that, of taking ownership of their life? And I don't know, maybe someone that you more closely relate to than Gen Z.
Well, first of all, I would say I believe that people at different stages of their life could pick this up and find value in it.
Hmm.
I think my own sort of the same young woman who wanted to go out and contribute something of value to the world, who wanted to be a part of making something meaningful. I feel like we are in a moment where we really need to help younger people
Mm.
and for yourselves to give you permission to do lives that won't look like ours and to get out of your way and to stop burdening you with expectations that are outdated and unrealistic. And also to
Hmm.
stop burdening you with kind of fear that this world is terrible and how
Yeah.
are you ever going to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So, you've got massive runway in front of you. And so this is not a fix. Like, I didn't want this to be like fixing people's problems. It's not. It's about
Hmm.
sort of getting into a mindset that allows you to find your way forward. And I just feel like, for a Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and whoever, looking forward and saying, I got a lot of room in front of me. How am I going to do this? How am I going to
Mm-hmm.
do this in such a way that I really kind of leverage the possibility of this world, that I turn this into my renaissance?
Yeah.
Instead of just this like, oh my God, the job market's terrible and I don't know what to do. And it's so easy to get sucked up into that. And I just feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's not good enough for you guys. You deserve something
Mm-hmm.
better. And like I've got teenage sons, so I want them to go out into a world and feel confident and courageous and clear about what they're doing here and not sort of, again, as I said, saddled with like 20th century expectations that just frankly don't apply anymore. So yeah, it's sort of where I think there's the opportunity for the greatest impact, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I want to just contribute, I think, to a generation younger than me having an impact
Yeah.
and not just surviving, but thriving and really like making some of the change that, frankly, my generation has failed to. So
Mm.
you guys need to go for it.
Yeah, and I love it, and I love that obviously you're writing from a female's perspective as a female, and I feel like that's something that is so missing in this realm of media is that women's voices aren't really heard of going off and doing something different besides for like becoming a Fortune 500 CEO.
Yeah.
And that to me, it's like not every little girl wants to be a Fortune 500 CEO. Not every amazing like story about women and women's success needs to be defined in that way. And
Yeah.
that has been something that I have struggled with of, okay, how do I define success? And what does that look like? And who can I model myself after? Because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, like you can read a man's book, but men give advice for men because that's their lived experience. And for women, it's just a little bit different. Like, as a woman moving to a foreign country, that had to have been terrifying because at the end of the day, women aren't treated the same everywhere. And it can be daunting. And so to hear and see that as a lived experience that someone else has gone through and you're now reading about it and they're telling you, hey, this is something that changed my life for the better. This is something that's amazing. And I want other people to do this.
Yeah.
So, what
Totally.
is one of the major takeaways that you want people to have from this book? Like their own renaissance, I imagine?
Yeah, totally. But I also want to come back to this issue of young women.
Mm,
Because one of the takeaways that I want you, them, whatever, however we address, to distinguish in their own minds the difference between achievement and authority. Because this
mm,
is really, really important. What I think has happened, it started with my generation. My mom was stay at home, the workplace was closed off for her. My generation came into the workforce. We started to, that was the battleground, if you will, for equality was work. And
yeah.
I think my generation and the millennials and those who followed became super high achievers. And so we try to achieve our way into power. And guess what? It doesn't
Mm,
work. Because in that process of becoming a super high achiever, you often exchange your own voice, your own opinions, your own attitude, your own uniqueness. And so what happened? We have legions of women who entered into corporate America, found out that actually nobody cares about, whether you were up until midnight. They're still not going to promote you. They're still not,
yep.
it's rigged. It's rigged. So
Mm-hmm.
you thought if you worked extra hard, you could work your way hard. It doesn't work. What
Yeah.
we didn't do was to cultivate personal authority, to
Mm,
tell young women that it was fine to have opinions, to back yourself, to be creative, to be unique, to have the confidence to go out and create your own thing. As you say, to have the confidence to make your own choices, even if those don't look like girl boss. I think,
mm,
your generation will be the ones who correct that idea that, the antidote to a domestic sort of life is scaling corporate America. It's like, and then you get there and realize that it's just as bankrupt as anything.
mm-hmm.
Whatever the choices that you want to make, you've got to back yourself in making those and understand that it's your personal power and self-belief and willingness to show up and, frankly, not be liked. I mean, I know that's a book that's been really, transformational for me. I think the constant desire for acceptance and approval, the need for people to always say, you're amazing, you look great, you this, you that, that's a prison. And so
Mhm.
I think understanding that, you can be as much of a high achiever as you want, but if you actually want to drive your own path, you need to kind of really step into your personal authority and back yourself. And that's not something that I think a lot of young women feel allowed to do. And I will say, even women my
Mhm.
age, we've never been allowed to do that. And that's where I think kind of you start to really come into yourself.
Yeah. And explain to me a little bit about authority and what that looks like and how it becomes personified.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, when a, a, a belief and, an embodiment in your own power, in your own
Mhm.
identity, in your own opinions. It's for me, if you want to, personified is I am working from the inside out rather than the outside in. I'm willing to step into
Mm.
a room with a set of opinions, facts, ideas, and I back them because I'm confident and comfortable that I have inherent value and I have
Yeah.
inherent power. And I think for a lot of us, we grow up looking for external approval all the time to tell us that we are of value and that our value is
Mhm.
much more a construction of how we look and how nice we are and how agreeable we are. And our ability to kind of make other people happy and please other people is a very central piece of our sense of place within the world. And so
Mhm.
I think the more that you feel like you're always trying to kind of calibrate how to satisfy other people and how to get other people's approval, often at the expense of your own happiness,
Mhm.
is when you really abandon your own authority.
Right.
So it's a really inhabiting of your own power and of your own identity and a willingness to exercise it within a space, knowing that, it might not go well. You might piss people off. You might make a mistake. You might do this. You might do that. But you have a belief in your own value. So much
Mhm.
so that if it does go wrong, you don't think you're crushed and ruined because of that. You're just like, okay, well, that didn't go well. So now I need to learn
Yeah.
from that and show up again. It's a comfort and a confidence in your own identity, your own voice, your own opinions, and
Mhm.
a belief in their inherent value so that even when they come up against, because the problem is that when you come up against somebody who has a different opinion, somebody who doesn't agree with you, for a lot of women, that lack of approval, that dissenting voice is like incredibly threatening to them because
Yeah.
they've always, been told to be likable and to be pleasing.
Mhm.
And so it's hard. And I know a lot
Mhm.
of young women who get spat out into workplaces where suddenly they've got to have hard conversations. People jump all over their ideas. Somebody steals their ideas and they're not willing to fight, to disagree,
Mhm.
to, show up and stand up. And that's where careers are made. That's where, character is built. And if you can't be in those spaces ever, then it's really hard for you to kind of gain that belief in yourself.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there are so many different aspects that you've talked about during this entire podcast about the obstacles that you've overcome in terms of the obstacles that you faced when you were moving to South Africa, the obstacles that you faced in the imposter syndrome that you had with writing the book. But obviously, there was something that was driving you that wanted to push you through of I need to get this out there, this is rewarding, and this is something that I see value in. And what were those things? What was that feeling for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has been an enduring desire to help people feel a sense of control over their lives and feel capable of creating a satisfying life. I mean, if I can get
Mm,
slightly sort of armchair therapy about it,
please.
I grew up with a very unhappy mother who was very trapped in a script she didn't want, in a story she felt no control over. And I was super aware of that from a very young age. And I think a lot of my own wiring was kind of baked there of like, okay, no,
Yeah.
hard, no, like I can't do this.
Uh-huh.
And so that sort of one, I grew up very much helping her and feeling like it was my role to do that. But
Hmm.
two, then embodying for myself, like, no, I need to, first of all, take a very big and very conscious decision to take myself out of circumstances that were going to constrain me, back
Hmm.
myself fully, regardless of what the other people's opinions were. So I think in a very deep way, there was this kind of combination of that very formative experience of, having a mother who I was very determined not to be, who I
Hmm.
grew up helping very much. And then my own wanderlust. I always wanted to see the world. I always wanted to go out and be in different places, and a real fundamental curiosity about like other people and their drivers and kind of what sort of motivated them and what satisfied them. So I think, a lot of those things conspired to get me to a place of saying, I want to work in the field of just human change and human growth and change. And,
Hmm.
now I think is such a pivotal moment because the world is going through what I don't think is an understatement to say a revolution. And we're being
Yeah.
called to show up differently. And I think, I want to play a part in helping people do that. And if I could do that with younger people who I think oftentimes get squashed into that story, and then by the time they wake up and want to do something different, they feel like it's too late. Like, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Let's get there early and try and help some people go out and really kind of create lives that are really satisfying for them.
Yeah. And do you think that the version of you that moved to South Africa back in 1994, do you think she would be surprised that you're writing a book about the 10 permissions?
No, I think no, I've written my whole life. So she was writing
Mm,
back then, you know. Uh
okay.
I wrote
She's like about time.
she was like, yeah, cool, come on. Why did this take you so long? What have you been doing? And
Yeah.
why did you not do this earlier? But also great timing, you, because guess what? A lot of people need to hear this message. And, what once felt optional, I think now feels like a requirement. Like, it is
Hmm.
not optional for you to be really on top of your own capacity to grow and change. And this, I just think, is such a great moment to jump into these conversations. So, I hope she would think that I had good timing. And I hope that she would think that, cool, here you go again on another like fantastic adventure that even though it might not be a geographic one where I'm, heading into a new country, it's also one of opening myself up to great conversations like with and meeting
Hmm.
people like you who I would otherwise never have met. And I think that's something, I'd love to kind of plant for people is that every time you make that decision to step into something, you open up space that you can't. It has to come through a new choice, a desire to do something and a willingness to do something that's a little bit different that maybe you haven't done
Hmm.
before. And when you do that, you just create all this space. And in that is new room. And that's where you find new capabilities and new space within yourself to do cool things.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I am so excited to go and read your book, but where can people find it? Where can people pick it up?
It's coming out in the States on the 16th of September. It's currently on
Ooh.
Amazon available for pre-order. So I would really
Hmm.
encourage everybody to pre-order it, please, because
Yeah.
Amazon loves pre-orders. But it'll be on Amazon and in bookstores on the 16th of September. They can also go and look at my website, 10permissions.com, which has some of the other stuff that I'm developing to support people because I recognize that a
Hmm.
book is just one small thing. I've developed an AI assistant to go with the book. So if you want to sort
Amazing.
of around with some of it and ask questions and engage. I really feel like
Hmm.
that's probably the way forward with ideas that people want to play with them more than just see them sort of static on a page. So, yeah, there's going to
Hmm.
be a variety of different things available to help people make sense of this in their own lives.
Yeah. And do you think you're ever going to do a TED Talk? Because I think you should.
I would like to make myself available.
Okay,
Um,
we're putting that out into the universe.
to the universe, let's manifest. I already have done one, I will say. I did a TED
Oh my
Talk.
gosh, really?
I did. In Cape Town, I did a TEDx talk in Cape Town about my experience coming to South Africa as a young woman. Yeah, so people can check that out too. I would love to.
Yeah.
I'm just so looking forward to being a part of a variety of different conversations and yeah, just and meeting amazing people like you who, resonate with this in their own way, because it's very personal and it'll be different for everybody. And I hope it spawns like just so many new stories and stories that feel
Mm-hmm.
integral. Like this is mine and it looks like me, and that's okay. That's good. Doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be some off the shelf story that somebody else wrote and you slipped into because you thought that was your only option. It's like there's so many
Yeah.
better options now. So let's go and take them. Like let's go and do it.
Yeah, I'm literally getting chills because I'm like, you're gonna start a revolution and you don't even know it yet. Like, people are gonna be hashtagging 10 permissions and they're gonna be like, ooh, I see this for you, like, so vividly. I'm telling you, this is what's gonna happen for you. But yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you and a pleasure to get to hear about the 10 permissions in your life, everything that you've accomplished and everything you're still looking to accomplish. It really, truly is inspiring for me. And I know that it'll also be inspiring for so many others. But yeah, Jill, it's really been a pleasure.
And right back at you. I mean, it's you are honestly exactly the kind of person I was, if I can say, that I was hoping this book would introduce me to. Like
Mm-hmm.
thoughtful people out there doing their thing, creating stuff and have creating conversations, sparking conversations. So I'm grateful that you said yes and excited to, just keep having conversations like this and yeah, maybe talk to you again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I'll have to give you my comprehensive review once I've actually read the book. Which, are you
Please
going to do an
do. And
audio
if
version, by the way?
huh?
Are you going to do an audio version also?
I will. I will. That's you have to know that when I was writing this over the course of these many years, like I actually
Mm-hmm.
fantasized about the audio version,
Okay, love
but the
that.
the company that's publishing it does not do audiobooks. So that will have to be my own endeavor. And right now it's not
Mm-hmm.
feasible, but I'm looking to do that sort of sometime second quarter of next year. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that'll be another thing that's out there next year.
Yeah, you have a voice for it. You should do it yourself. You shouldn't hire someone else to do it.
Oh, I will not let anybody else do it, Sarah. Trust me.
Good,
No, it's
good.
fine. It's fine. I will be reading it unless, of course, some. No, 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 no. I was about to try and come up with somebody who I think would. Like, fuck no, it's me. I'm doing it. Sorry, I just swore.
Yeah.
No, I will
No,
be
you're
reading
fine.
my own audio.
Good. Well, I'll reread it or re-listen to it when your audio version comes out, but I definitely will be reading it come September when it'll come out. I need to get on Amazon and order it. Don't normally use Amazon, but I'll make an exception just for this.
I know. Well, it will be in bookstores. Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you and I understand. It's a strange exchange one makes when you put things out and you go, okay, this does happen to be the biggest book selling platform, so I sort of have to play along
Compromise.
with yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes we
Yeah.
compromise.
Not everything can be perfect. Not everything can be perfect.
Nothing is perfect. So I'm accepting this imperfection and rolling with it because I can't change it. So I will
Yeah.
make it. Yeah.
Well, this is so exciting, Jill. Again, I will give you my review, whether that is in a video format or if just an email, but I'm so, so excited to read it. This is such an amazing added bonus to your journey. And
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I've loved our conversation and thank you for giving me the space to have it with you.
of course, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Consider the Source podcast. I hope you enjoyed my conversation today with Jill. And again, please make sure to pre-order her book, The 10 Permissions, on Amazon and get excited for when it comes out. I'm super stoked. I'm super pumped and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Additionally, please make sure to like and subscribe if you are following along on my YouTube channel. And then additionally, make sure you're subscribing wherever you typically listen to podcasts, as well as leave me a positive review or leave me a review of who you'd like to see on the podcast next. I will do my best to try and get them on. Thanks again for listening to another episode, and I'll see you next week. Bye.